Hello, everybody. Welcome. If I can get everyone's attention, we'd like to get going. Stick to our schedule here. We know you guys got work to get back to. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate Black History Month with us and to uplift some of our African American female directors here within the city. So we appreciate you guys coming and hope you enjoy what we have planned. My name is Dee Marie, and I've worked for the city for 10 years. My journey has taken me, many ways, and today I'm very honored to stand here and be able to take, participation in this and as well as share the stage with them. It's a big honor for me. We have an amazing panel, and we encourage them today to speak honestly and open, and we ask that you, our great audience, are open-minded and you listen to the information and are respectful of that as well. The idea that came behind this event today came from a couple of different venues for us. The main reasoning was behind young and Black women across the city wanting to find something to help them advance their careers, and we thought this was a great opportunity, especially given the landscape that has changed across the city with the department directors and just across the board as a whole. We thought this was a great opportunity, and it gave us a great forum to open conversations that may need to be had about the workplace and how some of us women in color have overcome obstacles and what has kind of come our way. So we hope that you feel uplifted and that this event empowers everyone. With that being said, we do have a couple of co-sponsors that helped us with this that we'd like to acknowledge as well. iWoke and Wern are two of them, and we have Asha and Kari here to just kind of give you guys a little quick a bit of info on what their programs and their committees entail. So I'd like to welcome them, please.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm not always good with my microphone voice. My name's Kari Hellison. I'm in the Department of Safety and Inspections, and I've been serving as the secretary for WERN, the Women Employee Resource Network, along with our chair, Madeline Mitchell from OFS. Over the past few years, WERN has held events on different topics like pay inequality, managing difficult conversations, collaboration, intersectionality, mentorship, negotiation, change management, the Me Too movement. And then last Friday, we held our first annual Galentine's Day lunch that was generously provided by our outgoing sponsor, Kathy Lantry, and our new network sponsor, Catherine Pankert from Libraries. We just ate and spent time together and shared stories of women who have had positive impacts on our lives. We don't have any current meetings on the books, but I have some flyers that I'll put out front somewhere. So if you want to grab that, and you can email me if you want to be on the list to be notified of any upcoming events. I know Madeline has some things in the works that just need the details ironed out. But it's a really great opportunity. Really, it's whatever we make of it. So again, please just email me if you want to be on the list. And if you ever have any ideas for meetings, Madeline would really appreciate that as well, as she's coming up with everything right now. And yeah, it's really what we all make of it. So we'd love to see you out there. Thanks.
All right. Hi, my name is Asha. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I work in our Parks and Recreation Department doing environmental education and outdoor recreation. I'm the co-chair of iWoke, which is Indigenous and Women of Color, and I'm the city's LGBTQ liaison, and I'm a proud auntie. So our mission at iWoke is that we seek to provide a safe space for Indigenous women and or women of color to give and receive support, share resources, and embark on individual and community healing. Our vision is that St. Paul employees who self-identify as Indigenous women and or women of color will feel supported across all facets, dimensions, and intersections of who they are, where they've come from, and where they're going. So we meet usually on the third Tuesday of every month. So our next meeting will be March 17th at noon. I'm not sure on the location yet. We cover kind of similar topics to what Kari was talking about with the Women's Employee Resource Network, but we also do have a lot of conversations around the multiple and many dimensions of our identities. Everybody's welcome to come. So far, we've only had women of color showing up to our meetings, and there's something really unique and special and sacred about those spaces. But everyone is welcome to come. Yeah, I think that's about it for us. And it's just, we're proud to have these folks up on stage, and it's great to see a bunch of people here today. Doesn't look like a ton of male presenting folks here, which is notable or noticeable, and that we all really need to support each other in this work. So thank you.
Thank you to both of them for that. I hope you all have the handout in front of you that has some biographies on there. You guys can read those over. I won't bore you with my reading those out loud here, but I would ask that you ladies please introduce yourself and just give us a quick little spiel about what you currently do in your role with the city here. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I will start. I am Sharon Kennedy Vickers. I am the Chief Information Officer. I manage the Department of Technology and Communications for the city. In my role, it is my responsibility to set the strategy around leveraging data and technology to help the mayor achieve his vision of a St. Paul that works for everyone.
Ooh, Sharon, nice short.
I could go on, but yeah.
Okay, she's passing the mic, literally. Tony Newborn, pronouns she, her, Chief Equity Officer for the City of St. Paul. I've been in this position for 2 years since the start of this current administration. Some of you all spent a lot of time with me yesterday at the Equity Change Team meeting. Part of what I do in conjunction in working within the mayor's office is to help build a St. Paul that works for all internally through the departments, and ensuring that all of our work is viewed through an equity, fairness, justice, diversity, and inclusion lens. And so we've established an equity framework, which includes strategic objectives and goals. And I work with the departments in providing a resource or resources and how to achieve those goals.
Andrea Turner, I'm the Director of Human Resources. I too started with the new administration. It's my responsibility to help ensure that we are recruiting and retaining talent across the city and addressing deficits that we may have with regard to development and providing opportunities for growth for individuals. And some of those things, they come in phases and they come over time, but that's the work of my office. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Val Jensen. I have been in my current role as the Director of HERO, which is Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity, for all of 7 weeks. So I obviously came in with the new administration, which isn't so new anymore. Our job in HERO is really around being the watchdog for equity and justice with the work that the city does. And so we have a hodgepodge of things that fall under procurement, contract compliance, human rights, and the Human Rights Commission, the PCARC, which is the Police Civilian Internal Review Commission. We also have the Advisory Committee on Aging, the Advisory Committee on Disabilities, and we'll soon have an Advisory Committee on Labor Standards, that which will entail the ESST and the minimum wage.
I am Susan Earl. I'm the budget manager, interim budget manager for the city. So I work in OFS. I'm part of the senior leadership team in OFS and work with a team of budget analysts to manage the city's budget process, mayor's decision making, and then assist the city council in their budget decision making every year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions that we have here for you ladies. we've got a set of questions here. Hopefully we'll get through and then be able to open the floor up to some of you. So if you can, in the talks of this, just think of a question you may have in mind. We may have time to get to those. So just FYI. So the first question I have for you, let's start with you, Susan. We'll go with you on the end here. What holds African American women back from the success they deserve in the workplace?
So when I thought about this question, it's systemic racism and sexism. Like, it's just the air that we breathe, the systems that we have, it's all baked in. And I think that's really the unfortunate thing about just the way the world is, the way our culture is. So it's hard for me to think about more than that. It's all built into everything we do. There's always going to be someone that's going to feel like you're not enough, that's going to judge based on your gender, your race, that's going to hold you back. And it might not always be obvious, but there's always going to be some little something that makes it harder for Black women to, have the success that they deserve.
Sure. And to follow up with that, given your great success in your career, what is your end game, and do you feel like you're there yet? I know you're still fairly young, so I don't mean to just drop that on your plate here, but kind of what is your end game?
I don't know. I don't know what my end game is yet. I think my goals broadly are to have success professionally, and to balance that with my personal life. Became a mom a couple of months ago. I think I've got a long career still ahead of me, a long life still ahead of me. So I'm definitely not at my end game yet, but I know that no matter what I'm doing, I want to be successful professionally. I want to, showcase what I can do, and also I think part of my end game is bringing other people along, and that have the work that I do really reflect on. Just reflect well on myself, reflect well on Black women, and that what I'm doing speaks to that strength.
Sure. Thank you. And congratulations on becoming a new mom. So then we'll go to you next, Valerie. To add to that, what do you think holds African American women back from the success that they deserve?
So I want to speak specifically to Minnesota. I'm born and raised here in the western suburbs where I grew up. Our family was one of the only African American families in my neighborhood. I graduated from Robbinsdale Armstrong, and when I graduated, there were about 800 people in our graduating class, and there were all of 5 African Americans. And so my view of what holds African American women back, along with what Susan said, is in Minnesota culture, because we lack what I would say a strong Black middle class, there are so many implicit assumptions that run along with being an African American woman. And some of those assumptions may be based in reality, but the passive aggressive Minnesota nice culture significantly holds back women of color. I've spent my career bringing women of color from across the country to the Twin Cities area, and they're always like, everybody's so nice at work, but nobody ever invites me home. And we all have our friends. My best friend, I've had her for 40 years, right? Because it's a Minnesota thing. And so it's hard to break in to Minnesota culture and to feel included. And I think that's particularly hard for African American women because unlike what's up here, the mayor has been very intentional about putting us all up here. But this is the first workplace. I'm 55 years old last week. This is the first workplace where I have been with women of color in key leadership positions in my entire career. So, the thing that holds us back is simply not having the access and opportunity that we need in order to be successful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I agree. Just to touch on that a little bit, Andre, if you don't mind, I think there's kind of a theme here that we all understand that this system is, kind of a root of what does hold us African American women back in the workplace. So to touch on a little bit, since you're in the older generation, may I ask your end game? And no pun intended by that. No disrespect by that, but just
recorded?
curious.
I gotta tell you, I am offended. No, I'm just
No offense.
We
I
all
promise.
are.
I'm just kidding.
Except for Tony and Susan, we're all.
I happen to be the one up here who's been gray since she was 11.
Yes. Being someone interested in myself and very interested in the opinions and insight that you guys have to offer. I'm just curious as far, as your end game, and do you feel like you were able to accomplish that in your career so far with what
I'm
you?
not done.
Oh no, I'm not shutting you down. I know.
No, I'm
Okay.
not done. My
Got it.
my aspirations are always to bring something additional to whatever environment that I'm in and raise my own game. And so I'm still doing that. I want to continually be challenged, and I want to continually be offering something. And so up until the moment that I'm no longer able to do that, that's my end game. And so what it is specifically and what it looks like at the moment, it is right here. Okay. If 2 years from now, a year from now, it might be something else. But the goal is to be present where you are.
Yes.
And to give the absolute best that you have, because this environment deserves it and nothing less. So that's my approach to your question, if that's...
I appreciate that, and I agree. We all too think of where we're not at yet, and we don't bask where we are and do our best with where we are. So I agree. I agree with that. Next question here, if you don't mind sharing this one, Sharon. Have you ever felt like you were expected to compromise a part of your identity to obtain professional success?
I would say no. I present as a Black woman. That's the major part of my identity. Of course, there are other aspects of that. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I am the youngest of 12, and I have never allowed anyone to force me to compromise a portion of my identity. I believe being a Black woman is something that I've been proud of, and I have always wanted to show up in spaces with that pride and that space. So I've never allowed or anyone to make me compromise any part of me. And I think it's important that, however we self-identify, there is a strong belief in those identities and what they bring and what they add, the value that they add to you and what they can add to the spaces in which you enter.
Thank you. I appreciate that. How about you, Tony? Within your career, have you felt like you've had to compromise aspects of your identity in the workplace to accommodate other people's feelings or emotions?
Sure. I appreciate this question because I too, like Sharon, am from the South, from Birmingham, Alabama. And, we're from deep South, the deep South, and Bible Belt. And when I've been up here for 16 years, but when I moved, I've never had really a thick Southern accent. But, some things, if you make me mad,
It will come out.
It'll come out.
Y'all getting on my nerves.
Yeah, exactly. It comes out. But, when I moved up here, I remember my mom came and I graduated from William Mitchell and we were walking down Summit. And my mom is used to, in the South, she's used to, and I am too, saying hello. We make eye contact with people. We say hello. We're not running through and trying to get away from people. And especially if it's someone that looks different from you. And so I learned, I had been up here for about 2.5 years, and my mom came in and she was like, hello, good morning. She's saying hello to everyone, and everyone is like, what's happening? What is she doing? She's running away. I'm like, Mom, stop talking to people because it's an awkward exchange. And she said, that's who I am, and you need to stay true to who you are. And it made me realize that I had moved away from that just a little bit. I had adapted, I to kind of this Minnesota culture, and I'd moved away from who I truly am. And that is the person that says, hello, I make eye contact with people. I genuinely mean hello, how are you doing? Not just as a place to waste time and casual conversation. And so that was a point for me to make sure that I stay on track. And moms are good about that, like telling you get back on track from wherever it is that you're going. And so I stay true to that. And so at my core and my root, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm Southern. And so, and that means that I'm going to be genuinely nice. I am not buying into the fake stuff. I actually want people to be successful. You may get on my nerves, but that doesn't mean that I don't care about you as a human being and want to establish that connection. And so, since that point in time, I've made sure to stay true to that. And so, at my core, I'm going to the good part of being Southern, stay true to that, and not compromise on who I am.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Valerie, would you like to?
Yeah, I just, because being born and raised here in Minnesota, this is like a really important question. So I was blessed enough to be adopted by an African American family, and who were very strong in their African American identity. But I was born to a white woman and a Black man, and I was given up for adoption at birth. One of the things that when this question resonates with me is because growing up as one of the only ones in a space, you know, even though your parents are constantly telling you, you know, you're to be Black and be proud and all of these things, it's very hard to do that when everybody around you defines beauty as blonde hair, blue eyes, no curves, no curly hair. And so growing up, I always felt that I was ugly. And even though my parents told me otherwise, right? So I always pulled my hair back, wore it in a ponytail. People couldn't tell what race I was. So, you know, I've been Native American when my mom put my hair in braids, or Puerto Rican, or everything under the sun, Turkish. I can't even tell you. I don't even know where that comes from, but it does. And so, not until living in the suburbs, not until I moved into North Minneapolis, which is where my mom's family is from. We lived in Golden Valley, which is literally just across the street, but it's literally a different world. And so I grew up, when I moved into North Minneapolis was the first time that I ever had somebody say, oh, you look good, and, you know, all this stuff. And I was looking around like, who they talking to, right? And so having to compromise in the sense of really being able to be yourself was very hard growing up, even though I had great parents. And so finally being in a place where who I was valued and beautiful was a huge eye-opener for me. And that didn't happen until I was 30. And so thinking about compromising and trying to decide where you fit and all of that stuff, it's hard here in Minnesota, even now, even though I live in St. Paul now for a reason, because I'm with people who look like me as well as many different types of people. But there are still places in Minnesota where you can go and not see people who don't look like you. As far as the majority population. And so when you're thinking about how you make people feel, whether they feel included in a space, it's hard in Minnesota if you are not in a space like St. Paul or Minneapolis, oftentimes, to actually feel comfortable in a space with who you are. So being aware of that, I think, is really important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Susan, if you don't mind talking about a time where you felt intimidated or discouraged, or maybe where you didn't fit in a workplace, and kind of how you handled that and how you overcame that.
Yeah. I had a hard time thinking of like one specific example, but I think it comes up a lot of just feeling like you're not respected as an expert in the room, that I really have to go out of my way to prove I know what I'm talking about, that I have to do a lot more work to, I have positional authority. I have an expertise in the work that I do, and still feeling like I'm not trusted, or like, well, let me double check that with somebody else. Let me go, well, are you sure? I'm gonna ask your boss real quick. Like, no, you don't need to. I'm good. Like, I can make this decision. Like, I'm fine. It's fine. So I think that happens a lot, and I think there's an element of it's just such a frustrating feeling to not just be trusted and respected for the work that you do and the expertise that you bring. Yeah, I think that's what that's what came to mind.
Sure. If you had advice now where you are in life in your current career, what would you tell your 22-year-old self starting out, in the professional world?
I think it's a combination of like wanting to learn, because I also think my 22-year-old self thought she knew a lot, and she, she was like ready to go. And that's not to say I didn't. I think there's an element like I do. It's a combination of trusting your expertise, trusting your ability, trusting your gut, and like that you're in a room for a reason. Mayor Carter said once, he said, when I have people in a room, I have them in a room for a reason, which really was. I really appreciated that. And so I think realizing that when you're in a room, you're there for a reason, but also be there. The reason can also be to learn. So I think it's a combination of being ready to learn about whatever is going on, like kind of taking in all that information to get to where you're headed in your career, but also trusting that you're there, you got this job, you got to where you are, you're in this meeting, you're being asked this question because someone values your opinion. And just because everyone in the room doesn't value your opinion doesn't mean your opinion's not valuable.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Andrea, same to you. Was there a time in your career where you felt kind of out of place, where, the situation on you just didn't feel like you fit in? And kind of how did you deal with
It's
it?
very difficult to pick any one instance because it happens repeatedly. So I'm going to give you two instances. I'm going to give you an instance with a much younger me. I'm right out of law school. I'm about to decide whether or not I want to practice law or do something else. And I'm being interviewed. Now, I wasn't born in the dark ages. Don't let the gray hair fool you. And right in front of me, my resume was being folded up and treated like a piece of trash on the desk of the person who was interviewing me. Right in front of me. He's rolling it up, he's playing with it, and he wanted to talk about how I got into Swarthmore. Mm-hmm. And he was a little perturbed that his kid didn't get into Swarthmore. And I said, am I here interviewing for a job or what? At that point, I'm not going to work for you. So I might as well just say what I'm thinking. I'm in Philadelphia. What the heck? It may or may not follow me. I don't know. It could. Who cares? But I think part of what we have to understand is there are always going to be people who are questioning whether you belong somewhere. Mm-hmm. I started this job answering a bunch of questions. How'd you get this job? Who do you know? Mm-hmm. So I throw it right back. How'd you get your job? And who do you know under the previous administration? See, we're always looking for angles to try to devalue what someone brings to the table. And we do it in very passive ways. And they seem like just an honest question. I just wanted to know why. Why? Because somewhere in the back of your mind, you're asking questions and minimizing what I have to offer. You're trying to find ways to shrink it because it's actually bigger and you're not comfortable. So I need to know you knew somebody, or I need to know you had some mystical way in to this job. And the reality is, no, we all bring something truly amazing to the workforce, all of us. And we should not be taught, encouraged, pressured to minimize it. But we are every day. and we have to fight against that. And so I have had to do it over the years, and I'm still doing it. I was at Harvard last year, and there were people in that group trying to figure out how to minimize folks in the group. And I'm like, we've all arrived, whatever that means. There were 72 of us all brought together for a reason. Some were mayors, some were elected officials, some were chief of police, but we were all there to learn from each other and to contribute. But even in that setting, how do I make myself feel better? Because that's really what someone's doing. I need to elevate me. The only way I can do that is to minimize you. And we all have to let that light shine. It sounds contrite, but it's so real. And don't give in to it, because we're going to always be pressured to do that until more of us stop doing it and stop giving in. So.
I agree, and it gives us a chance now to look at how we react and how we ask things in the face of people, and how you may think it's an innocent way of saying something and just asking just a minuscule question, but really to that person, it could really mean something more. So we always have to think about what we say and why we say things and how they'll come off to people. So I agree. Can I ask you to not only, give your 22-year-old self, but any other young people that maybe hear some advice, to the younger group of up and coming, employees that, may not have the guidance or that sort of thing? What can you offer?
Yeah, I won't talk to my 22 self, because I, like Susan, knew everything. I couldn't be told too much. And that was earlier than 22, trust me. Here's what I will say. We are all a gift in general, and I think when you start at that premise, at that spot, we have a lot to learn. At 22, we don't know it all, contrary. And I was reminded of that quite a bit too, that I didn't know what I thought I knew. But the message that was prominent was, you are special, right? And you do have gifts. But I was also told early on in life that your gifts aren't better than someone else's. And that was a message that has stuck with me all these years. I'm not better than anybody else, and I'm not worse than anybody else. But what I bring to the table is equally valuable to what someone else brings to the table. And so I would tell that younger person who is thinking about, how do I move forward? I would say, hold your head up high. Be open to learning at all times. Listen more than you speak, because you'll learn more that way. Every time we say something, people learn a little bit more about us. But what are you learning about the people you work with, and the direction you want to go, and how do you want to carve that path out? So often we spend more time trying to plan and maneuver to get there, right? And sometimes getting there is not a straight path. Sometimes it's like, I don't know where I went, but that was good. Now that I look back, it was good and it was necessary, right? But we need to recognize that our work and our interactions with each other will pull us in different directions. How do you make the best of it and still continue to move in your path, right? But I would say learn to listen, because I don't think we do enough of it. We're uncomfortable with it. We're uncomfortable with not knowing the answer. We're uncomfortable with not being able to respond to something. And we have got to get more comfortable in paying attention to actually what's going on in the room, going on around you, going on with your colleagues. Pay attention, because there's a lot more happening than what you think is going on. And you miss opportunities and windows when you don't pay attention to your environment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Tony, if you don't mind sharing how you've seen the diversity of the landscape with the employment force change over your career, and kind of how what do you see going towards the future as well with that?
That's a loaded question. Lots of things. We're seeing this happening here. The doors are the access to positions are at the leadership level are starting to change for people of color in general. And women of color. There's an article, I can't remember whether it's Harvard Business Review, but one of those type of journals where they're talking about, if you want to fix something, if you want to make something change in an organization, you hire a woman to do it, to lead it. And because we fix stuff and we do it well. And so we're starting to see that bit of a change, not to the point of where it's dramatic and significant enough to say, hooray, we've arrived. But I'm starting to see that a bit, that access, that door being open, that seat at the table, and not so much of the questioning anymore, but it's still happening. But that starts with having a leader that says we're going to kick the door open. Mm-hmm. We're going to have inclusive hiring processes. We're going to have the subject matter experts at the table, being the community, the residents of St. Paul, being at the table, serving in those positions to select or make recommendations to the leader as to who should be the director or the chief equity officer for the city of St. Paul or whatever organization. So starting to see some of that happen, but not to the standpoint of where, again, that we've arrived. One thing that I want to bring up that it ties back to the first question that you asked, and maybe a little bit of piggybacking off of Andrea, when we talk about like why are we having these experiences in the workforce as it relates to racism and sexism and discrimination? This is Black History Month. Every Black History Month, my dad watches Roots, all 22 episodes of Roots, right? So I'm channeling him right now, not to get to a place of anger, which he does, but to get to a place of like grounding ourselves in our roots. So we have to go back. We can talk about roots and slavery and all of that, but we could talk about the laws that have been put in place that said Black people, and at first it was Black men, 3/5 of a person. And so when we think about like, why is there discrimination? Why aren't we at the table? What's happening? Why are people doing that? You don't just change your mindset, just a blink of an eye, from being 3/5 an animal, chattel, 3/5 of a person to, let's have 4 or 5 directors and key leadership positions, and we believe that they belong. Like that just doesn't, and it hasn't happened overnight. And so when we think about that, like, why is this stuff happening? And thinking about, I think Val and I were having a conversation around, it's one thing to have women in these leadership roles, women of color in these leadership roles, and having that level of influence. But think about you as an employee. Have you reported to someone who doesn't look like you? And when we go back to that history and that 3/5 of a person and how we see Black women and see Black people as a whole, are you respecting them? Are you bringing those biases and that discrimination and what your parents taught you or aunt and uncles taught you, and going back to that time when we were 3/5 of a person or chattel, into your work environment? And so when we talk about the change, yes, I'm seeing some of that change happening, and we're a bit of in a bubble. And with the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and all the people here at this table, and having such a great mayor, but we know that that's not happening at this level in the corporate environment, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector. And so I really think that it's important to think about the why. And think about what role you play into that. And like, my dad, he's watching probably Roots now, calling people a bunch of names that he shouldn't be calling folks. But that's my connection. That was the environment that I grew up. Malcolm X, Roots, all of that. And all the things that he said. I can't separate myself from how I grew up in my environment, what my dad taught me, good or bad, right or wrong, of what he said. And so that happens to all of us. You're a product of your environment and the product of our past environments and our past histories. And so how do we effectuate change and when it relates to having a more inclusive, diverse, equitable work environment, and how we see that change and see folks like us at the table more often and across these organizations, we as employees play a part of that too. Our success and those doors opening and how we view women, Black women in particular, in leadership roles and the relationships that we build and the support. Are you willing to support a Black woman in a leadership role just the same as you would a white woman in a leadership role? And what are those biases and preconceived notions and assumptions are you bringing to the table to be able to do that? So while we have a great mayor, we have a great deputy mayor and a leader that understands diversity, equity, and inclusion and has kicked the door open for women like us to be at the table in this administration, it's great to have the leaders, but it also is for us from an individual standpoint, how are we growing and seeing the world change? And are we knocking down those biases and assumptions? And are we willing to support and see the value, going back to what Andrea said, of a Black woman being at the table, and it's not some sort of checkbox that we've just checked off. It's actually Andrea deserves to be at this table, and bringing her special gifts to the table and to this administration is well deserved and well received for us. So I don't know if that gets all to your question, but I just
No.
wanted to tie in
Yep,
some of
no,
the things
I
that we
appreciate it.
talked about.
Yeah, thank you. And before I open it up to the audience for any questions, I want to open it up to you ladies and ask if you want to touch on anything that we've talked about that I didn't give you the opportunity to. I know we have a limited time, so I want to make sure I didn't skip anyone, or even open the floor if you would like to share a bit of advice with our employees here. I'm giving you guys the floor for a quick second if either of you are interested.
I just wanted to say something that tag along with what Tony was saying. I think one of the biggest barriers to success for any organization, including my own, is this lack of understanding how much those microaggressions impact the people that they're happening to. So for instance, I always like to give examples. I can't tell you how many times in my life, at least once a week, I will get, "Oh, you're a lawyer?" Right? Or, "You went to Carleton?" Along with, "So how did you get in?" Right? And so while those seem like innocent questions, it's like, well, would you ask that of a majority person? Would you ask that of me if I was a man? Would you ask, so there's all these unconscious biases that sit in the back of our brain. But the thing that impacts, like Tony and I talk about this all the time, is these little microaggressions that say, "Yeah, I know you're there, but you really don't deserve to be there," or "How did you get there?" Those types of things really, they're like little micro cuts, right? And they hurt. And so for me, it's like I'm always conscious of whether it's whatever the race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or whatever, being conscious of the questions that I'm asking, that I'm trying to be conscious of my own bias, because we all have them, right? But I think it's like some of the things, we are living in a little bubble here, to be honest. Most of my career has not been like this. But it's those kinds of assumptions that we make about, when you close your eyes and you think of lawyer, you don't necessarily think of all of the, how many lawyers are sitting up here? We've got 3. When you're thinking of certain other things, leadership positions, oftentimes those little, unconscious bias pop up in our head. So just being conscious of the fact that the world is changing and we all do have gifts. But it's like most of the people who've worked for me have never worked for an African American woman. And so being conscious of, wow, that is different. And so what are some of those little microaggressions that might pop up?
Thank you.
I'm going to add a quick
Certainly.
comment. We're here and we're talking about Black history, and you are the opportunity to sit up here with my colleagues is exciting and amazing. But there's a malaise that exists in government. It doesn't mean that everybody has it. It just means there's a malaise. How many times have you heard, I'm gonna wait out this administration? I'm gonna wait it out because they're doing some things that I don't like or agree with or whatever. I'm gonna wait it out. And so we wait it out during a moment in time where a change is happening. And what usually happens if nothing happens? We tried it.
It doesn't work.
We tried it. It failed, right? So the success of whatever happens, because these seats are occupied today by us, will speak to the success of the city 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and the residents. And so what I want to encourage people is, whether you have worked for a Black woman or anybody that's different from you, is how are you leaning in to the work and being supportive so that change on a broader context can happen. That's my challenge to the city. This is how we'll make history, right? It's not just about us sitting here. It's much more significant. And it takes all of us to do it. Not just us. So the question is, what are you up to doing? What are you prepared to do as you go back into your workplace and do your jobs to help take the city further? It's not a question to answer. It's one that's personal. Because I think we all know where we've had an impact, positive or negative, right? So the question is, what are we willing and recognize that we need to do for this to move forward? Or was it just a moment in time? That's where change occurs. It survives time. It exceeds time. It surpasses time. And it outlives the moment that we're in. So that's my challenge to all of us. How do we make it different?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I believe we'll have time if we have someone in the audience that wants to ask us maybe one question here for them. Stand up and speak loud for us, please.
I'll stand up and speak loud. My name is Menica. I work in PED. I have a question. Just as a woman of color, I know I was taught that I had to work twice as hard and work just as long and harder than anyone else to get ahead, and then also play by the rules. So how do you play by the rules and then also get promoted or move ahead and still be true to yourself? I feel like I've often been told those three things and they don't always
Go in
I
line.
always line.
So
Who wants to?
I think you have to define success for yourself and figure out what success looks like. And I think a lot of times we think success is a position or a title, it doesn't have to be. So I think it starts with you being true to yourself is really understanding what it is that you hope to accomplish, and understanding what it is that you're not willing to compromise or sacrifice in order to have that, and realize that you're going to have to play by your own or rewrite the rules in a lot of situations. It's, the rules are there, for a reason, but there's nothing saying that those rules cannot be changed. And, as a Black woman, you are often going into a space where you're going to have to have the rules change. And I think that's where the extra work comes in. It's that knowing that these rules were not designed for my success. So I've got to change those rules. And here is what I want and what I deserve. And here's what I'm willing to do to make that happen. And then sometimes success is leaving a space where you are tolerated and not celebrate it. So that could be success. So it's for you deciding what success actually looks like, and not having someone else's definition, and knowing that you're going to have to create that space for yourself.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to touch on that?
I'll add just a few comments. I think that when I started with, I worked for the other city, the city of Minneapolis, and so that was my first job after law school, first legal job, and I dug deep. I went in. I was staying there all night, all day. I just wanted to do a good job, and I wanted to learn the process so that I could effectuate change and to really help people. And that led to me being, and I spent a lot of time, my friends were like, what are you doing? Why are you working all the time? I take big stacks of cases home and reading them at night and, doing all of that. But the manager that I had, who was a man and a man of color, was abusing the system. He just wasn't a good manager. And so he relied on me. It's like, oh, we have this young attorney who's going to do my job. And that's what I did. And not knowing that I was doing his job, I just knew to do what I knew to do, and which was to go above and beyond and get the work done. But so he allowed for me to just do his work, right, for 3 years. And finally, a manager, a new director came in, and she was like, what's this about that Tony's doing? And why aren't you doing what she's doing? And they let him go. And I was then...
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. They let him go. And then I was finally, because and the union folks in the room would be appreciative of this, I was definitely working way out of title and not getting paid. And if I wanted to, if I knew that I should be doing this, I could have made some sort of claim around that. But I chose not to. And instead, the new director came in and said, hey, we're going to promote her to the senior investigator. And that led to being the assistant director of the Complaint Investigations Division. And so, but what I learned from that is, after going in, learning the rules of the game, learning the players, and getting all the information that I needed to be able to eventually lead that team, I played the game from the standpoint of I did what I needed to do to learn the job. But what resulted out of that was they saw that she was loyal. They saw that I was loyal, that I was going to stay committed to the organization. And even though I dealt with mistreatment and abuse, and not from a standpoint, from a professional standpoint, but I lasted, and I was committed to that work. And so that was a certain situation. I'm not saying that that applies to every situation, but I think the advice that I would give you is to learn the job, learn the rules, and as Sharon said, figure out how to manipulate them.
I would say rewrite them
or
if
rewrite
they are
them.
not serving us.
Yes. To where it serves you. And I didn't know that when I was 24, 25 in the Civil Rights Department, just innocently going along and doing someone else's job. But I learned that afterwards, that what I was doing was my best, but what I needed to focus on is learning the rules, learning how to rewrite the rules, and also ensuring that people knew my value, and know that you can go somewhere else, and having that option that you can go somewhere else with your special talents, as Andrea said, and be successful. But I think part of it is it's a double standard. It's expected, especially for women of color, to put in that work, but do it not because you're playing this game and someone else's game. Do it because it's going to make you better at your job, so that when you get to that place of like, I'm ready for the next level up, it's because you know that other person's game, you know his game and her game, and all of that, you know the work, and then you can advocate for yourself to take it up to the next level. But I do think that that's part of, at least that's been part of my path. It may not work for everyone, but you need to craft something that works for you. And a blanket statement about play the game and move up and do all this work. No, it needs to work for you. And now that we're starting to, going back to the diversity question, now that we're starting to see more women of color, people of color, at the tables, ensure that you had established that relationship with them, and hopefully you have an advocate that can speak on your behalf, similar to how I did. She came in and she said, "This is a mess. We need to get rid of it." And so fortunately I had an advocate, but I needed to develop that relationship with her to see my worth, my value, and that something needed to change. So that's a mixed bag of a bunch of stuff that I just said, but that would be the advice that I give.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. So hopefully, we all walk away here with something positive. I appreciate you guys taking the time to participate in this. I'd also like to thank my fellow Black History Committee members. We started planning in the summer and planned all the way through to hopefully provide awesome events for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Please use the compost bins on your way out, eco-friendly, please. And then also next Friday, please come to our final event. There will be a meal provided and another presentation. So thank you guys, and I appreciate everything. Enjoy your day.